If you have a scary story you'd like to hear on the channel, then go to mariesfield.com and send it my way. And of course, thank you. This is a bit of an unconventional scary story, and some may think it's more strange than terrifying, but for me, it was probably one of the few moments in my life where I was seriously scared. I don't scare easily, and I do have a bit of a tough guy bravado about me, and sure, I may be a bit ignorant to the ways of the world, but I like to believe I can hold my own out here in this whole big bad world. That said, no. When the whole thing went down, I was feeling like I was a wimp. So, in order to really tell the story, we have to establish some background, of course. Isn't that how all these scary stories go? Back when this happened, I had just turned 17 a month prior, so it was December of 2014. I had applied for and successfully landed my first job at a certain sandwich shop, one that is decently well known, but nowhere near the size of Subway or anything. Despite the fact that the interview was literally just, "How old are you and have you ever worked fast food before?" I was seriously excited to have landed a job at all. This shop had a handful of employees, a couple shift leads, a manager, and then an owner that owned two of the same shop. I will also mention that not all the locations were franchised, such as his two locations. A lot of them were owned locally and basically paid for the brand recognition. They had to follow the corporate guidelines for the product, but that was it. This being the case, it was actually kind of nice working there, as they paid better than franchise locations, and they were a lot more lax on how things were done. So long as the place stayed clean and the customers were happy, we weren't harassed or pushed to do menial tasks because we had free time. There wasn't a whole lot of free time, but when it wasn't busy, we were pretty much free to sit in the back and chat. One of the surprising things I noticed when I started working there was that the owner would occasionally work behind the line and would also sometimes close the shop with a manager. This was a bit odd to me. I thought the whole point of owning a small place like this was to pretty much not work and reap the rewards. But it was also kind of nice because the owner was a pretty legit dude. He was actually the person that I had my welcome aboard meeting with, and he was kind, professional, and seemed to be genuinely supportive. The managers were pretty decent, and the rest of the staff did their jobs well enough. I think all this really led to an environment that was welcoming for everyone, and the customers could tell. So all that is the background. Good place to work, decent employees and management, and the owner was probably the nicest person to own a sandwich shop. With all that out there, it didn't take long for me to see some of what actually was going on, specifically with the owner. I started the job in December, probably 2 weeks before Christmas, and in my second week, I was working a shift with the owner and one of the managers. During the shift, a large black SUV pulled up to the front spot, and in walked two very well-dressed men. At this point, we weren't busy, so I happily washed my hands and put on my gloves, then turned and asked how I could help these gentlemen. Now, again, I'm not a small dude, and I'm confident in my abilities to hold myself. But these guys, something about them was intimidating. As soon as I turned around, one of the guys asked for Marcus, who was the owner of the establishment. Almost as if on cue, Marcus walks out from the back and tells me that he will take care of these two and that I should go ahead and take a 10-minute break outside. He was very pushy about this, and as much as I didn't want to go out into the snow, I went ahead and did what he asked. As I was headed out the back door, I was stopped for a second by the manager, and I told him that Marcus told me to go out back and take a break because of two guys asking for him. As soon as I said this, he let me go and headed into the shop, but I could tell by the look on his face that these guys were a big deal. Now, when two grown men react to visitors like this, it's obvious that something is up, and it's either not legal or it's ethically questionable. In the end, it wasn't my business, so I let it go and took a break out back. About a week later, a situation like this played out the same when the same guys showed up, except this time Marcus wasn't there. I told them as such, and when I mentioned that I would be happy to help them, the look they gave me, it felt like daggers. I then mentioned that I could get my manager if that would help, and then shouted to the back for Corey, the manager that was there the last time this happened. He got to the front and, much like Marcus, told me to go ahead and take a 10 out back. By this point, I kind of assumed the situation was flat out something illegal, like drugs, and I didn't want to be involved with it. So I just said screw it and went out to my car. It was snowing, and if I was going to take a break, I was going to do so comfortably. For about a month, this didn't happen. No suited men, no scared managers, nothing like that. And things were pretty normal at the store. Then, somewhere around the end of January, I was working with the owner on a closing shift, and the manager that was supposed to be on duty had to call in. So it was just the two of us. We had finished up the shift for the night, and I was in the back doing the dishes when I heard Marcus say something like, "Sorry, we're actually closing up for the night." But he trailed off near the end like he was surprised by something. I thought maybe it was someone he knew, completely blanking on the two guys, so I kept doing the dishes until I looked over and saw him walking back, being followed by, you guessed it, the two fancy guys in the black SUV. The only difference was that this time they were pushing him to the back, and they both had guns trained right on him. This is where I kind of fell apart mentally and became a wimp. I pretty much just pushed myself with my back against the wall and put my hands up in hopes that I wouldn't be a victim to whatever was going on here. I think they were a bit surprised to see me there and not the manager, because they paused for a moment and started talking to each other in a language I didn't understand. Marcus said something to them in the same language, I'm assuming telling them that I had nothing to do with any of what was going on and to leave me alone. They didn't seem to like him back talking, as one of them shoved him to the ground and then pointed his gun at me. To say that I became a baby would be an understatement. I was 17. I had been working making sandwiches for a little over a month and had been working to save money for a car, which was a dumb thing to think about, but it was all I could get into my brain. I was about to die and not get my car. This was the end of it for me, and I had no idea why. The guy that wasn't pointing his gun at me grabbed me by my shirt and walked me over to the walk-in. He stood me facing away from him and kicked the back of my knees, so I fell into a kneeling position. This was that make or break moment, and I honestly thought I was dead. Thankfully, I heard him grab something, then felt him tying my hands and feet up in duct tape. He tied me up to the point where I couldn't move at all, then shoved me down and shut the door. I just kind of laid there on the floor and stared at the meat on the shelf and thought, my God, those guys were cartel or something, and I almost just died. I tried to listen to what was being said, but they were speaking that other language, so I had no idea. I heard Marcus screaming, I heard them yelling, then I heard the door to the back slam shut and nothing. It was silent. I was seriously tied up in the walk-in, and it was about 10 at night. No one was going to be coming into the store until around 9 the next morning, and my parents probably weren't going to worry about me since I had a habit of crashing at my friends' houses. What's worse, with how cold it was, how scared I was, and how much adrenaline was seriously making my heart pump, there was no way I was going to fall asleep. I just sat there and stared at the wall for the entire night and felt like I was freezing. Thankfully, this was the walk-in fridge and not the actual freezer, so while it was cold, it wasn't going to kill me. The next morning, I was beyond ecstatic to hear someone come in, and I was screaming as loud as I could to get their attention. Needless to say, they were a bit more than shocked to find me bound and lying on the floor. They got me out and they called the cops, as well as the manager who showed up in 5 minutes flat and started asking questions about the whole thing. He was there and trying to gather more information than the police were, which made me realize that he had a stake in this whole thing too. He didn't really seem keen on speaking to the police about the whole thing, but after I was questioned, I was given a number to call with more info and told I could leave. That's honestly my whole story with this. To the best of my knowledge, they never found the owner or the two men. My guess is that they're no longer in the country. The store actually ended up closing, and I'm pretty sure the police started investigating the whole thing, but they didn't bother me anymore about that. I didn't go back after that night, and I decided to just focus on school. I will say that I feel bad about whatever happened to Marcus, but I am beyond thankful that they decided I wasn't enough of a threat that they needed to take me with them, wherever it is that they went. Way back when I was 15, I used to be a member of a medium-sized online forum that was designed for indie authors to share their work and to get feedback or even win small prizes for little contests and competitions that they held. I was actually one of the most active users on the forum because I was really giving being an author everything I had, and I was putting a lot of effort into writing short stories for a collection. My whole situation started during one of the writing competitions I mentioned. I don't recall the theme. I just remember that I was super confident that I could write a decent little story for it. Much to my surprise, I actually won the competition. The prize was a $20 gift card to Target, so it wasn't like it was some big contest for a major prize. But to me, it was an amazing feeling knowing that I had won this writing contest where dozens of people had entered. The day that I won, I received a private message from one of the head mods to the forum. At the time, I only knew him as White Oak, and after a while, which I'll explain in a moment, I learned what his full legal name was. That said, for the sake of the story, I'm just going to refer to him as White Oak. So, White Oak sent me a DM with a message saying, "Congrats on winning our monthly writing competition. Your story was chosen by majority vote of the mod team, and as such, you have won a gift card. I just need to know where to send it and who to send it to, and I'll get it in the mail right away." And being a super excited 16-year-old girl that was feeling like they had just won the world, I responded with my first and last name, as well as my home address. At no point did I pause and think that maybe I should have asked my parents or not sent this person my home address, because I thought this was going to be a professional trade-off. I won a contest, I was getting a prize. After I sent it, he told me that he would get the card in the mail here as soon as possible, and once again told me that my story was perfectly written and just really talked up my prose. I was elated that someone that was so important was giving me attention. He was important to me, at least, because he was a big shot on the forum. I thanked him and we had an informal conversation, and that was pretty much where I thought it was going to end. I thought it was going to be just him complimenting my work and me thanking him. Of course, that's not where it ended. About a week later, I hadn't received any word on the gift card or whether or not it was on the way, and while I didn't want to be pushy, I decided to send White Oak a message just to ask if he had sent it yet, as I was pretty excited to get it. He messaged me back pretty much right away and said that he was going to send it in the next day or two, but he hadn't yet. I thanked him again and just mentioned that I was still excited about the whole thing. After a few minutes of not getting a message back, I thought that was the end of the conversation again. But then White Oak sent me a response saying, "You know, you're really beautiful." I was a bit confused. He had no way of knowing what I looked like. I messaged him asking where that came from, and he responded saying, "I looked you up and found your Facebook. I was looking at your pictures and just wanted to tell you that you were beautiful." To say I was a bit shocked would be an understatement. I responded by saying, "Oh, I didn't expect you to look me up." In his words, he couldn't help himself because of how sexy my name was, and he said that he was very happy that I was just as sexy as my name. At this point, I knew that he was going to keep going with it, so I figured I would shut him down and just tell him that I was 15 and that he should probably move on. He then tells me that he, again in his words, preferred girls my age because they were less likely to fight back. I was mortified by this comment. I didn't respond to the message. I figured I would move on instead and it would just go away. Unfortunately, on this forum, there was no method of blocking people or ignoring them, which was a major design oversight for the page. Unfortunately, because of that, I had no way to stop him from messaging me, and he did keep messaging me. He would send me a message daily telling me how much he loved me. He would send me random messages asking me to send him naked pictures of myself. He would send me messages telling me all about the things he was doing to himself while thinking of me and while he was creeping through my Facebook. After several days of putting up with this, I decided I would move to take action against White Oak. I figured I would contact the owner of the forum with a message and tell him what his second in command was doing. This did not go as I expected, of course. I sent him a message with screenshots of the messages that White Oak had sent me, and I explained that I had given White Oak my information for the gift card I won from the contest. I tried to give him as much information and explain the whole thing as best I could, and the screenshots I took were more than enough to really display what was happening. He did reply, but his response was that he would have a talk to him about it. He didn't say sorry, he didn't seem to really care, or that he was shocked at all. About 2 days later, he sent me another message that said, "I spoke with White Oak about the situation, and he told me that it never happened, and I believe him. Please do not contact us about this again." I was livid. He was literally believing that White Oak had never sent me any of these messages, even though I literally had receipts. I messaged him back saying just that, asking how he could believe White Oak over me when I had screenshots of the conversation, and then mentioned that I would be passing the information to the police. I thought for sure that he would see that he needed to take it seriously. But then, the next day when I went to see if he replied, my account was gone. Like, completely gone. I tried to log in and it kept giving me an error saying that my account didn't exist. When I tried to do a forgot password, it said that my email didn't exist in the system. He had completely deleted my account, probably as a way to cover for White Oak, as I now had no live access to my account. I still had my screenshots, but a lot of good that would do for me if I couldn't prove anything on the site. At this point, I decided to bring my mom and dad into the situation. I told them that I had won a writing contest and that I had given the site my information for the gift card. I told them about how the guy had found me on Facebook, and I gave them my screenshots and explained the whole thing. They weren't happy, obviously, and they implemented several controls on my internet usage, which was fine. But when my dad contacted the police, they basically told him that there wasn't much they could do without information on the person, since all I had was their username on a random forum. Again, disappointing, but this was around 2008 or so. I don't think they had the forensic capabilities that they do now, so I can't really say that I fault them. Maybe they could have done something more, but it is what it is. And then the final little bit of the story. About a week after this all happened, I signed into my Facebook, which I admittedly should have deleted considering he had found me. I saw when I logged in that I had a friend request from a man named Gary T. At first, it didn't click in my head who it was. I accepted it, and as soon as I did, I got a message saying, "I'm sorry we had to delete your account. I miss you so much, and I'm glad you accepted my request." I responded with some harsh words, and thankfully, Facebook does have a block option, and I blocked him. I felt sick that he really had found my Facebook, and that he thought I would seriously just sit there and let him stay on my friends list. Thankfully, that was the last time I ever heard from White Oak or Gary. The only reason I thought about submitting this story was that White Oak came up in conversation with my sister. I had put it out of my mind after all these years, but she mentioned him for some reason during one of our conversations, and it led me to thinking about the whole thing. That night, I actually went home and Googled his last name, and after a bit of digging, I actually found out that he was in prison, at least probably. I found a story about him being arrested and charged for lewd behavior with a minor, as well as several counts of soliciting minors. From what I read, he's going to be in prison for a very long time. So, at least with that fact out there, I guess I never have to worry about meeting White Oak ever again. This happened when I worked at a local fish and seafood restaurant. I was working the evening shift, and we had a couple come in, so I greeted them and escorted them to a nearby booth. I asked them for drinks. He got some kind of soda, and she got water. I came back with their drinks and took their order. He ordered a full course meal. He got an appetizer, an entree, and even got a side salad and rolls. And when I asked her, she just looked up at me with a deer in the headlights look, and he said she doesn't want anything, and quickly moved the conversation back to him, asking about a cake, and then ordering said dessert. I walked away, kind of confused, but put in the order. I've seen similar instances where one person didn't order anything, or ordered very little, or took most of it home, but never seen where someone answers for another person saying they didn't want anything. But I thought, I don't get paid enough to investigate it, and it's probably not that deep anyways, so I moved on. But in those situations I mentioned, the parties are still talking to each other, or maybe even sneaking stuff off their plate, But these two people were doing nothing of the sort. He was nearly inhaling his food and looking pretty gross about it too, chewing with his mouth open, snorting, coughing, making a mess. All of it, and the woman just sat there, sitting straight, hands being held in her lap, with her ankles crossed, never taking her eyes off him, with no conversation to be had. When he finished, he paid, leaving a decent cash tip, and left, and I figured that would be the last of that weird situation. But then they started coming in weekly. He would order stuff, and she would never get anything, but she always seemed to look worse and worse. The first time, she was in a nice fitted black dress. It had a shimmer to it, like it was silky, but had a silver lace along the edge of the sleeves and bottom hem and the collar. She was on the thinner side, but it was form-fitting. I think you know what I mean. But every time they came in, he would wear something different, but she was always in that same dress. It looked like the dress was falling apart as she wore it. It seemed to get looser on her, like she was losing weight, or she had multiples in different sizes. The lace hem on the bottom was unraveling, and the one around her chest was discolored, like something dark was spilled on it. After a while, it just seemed unsettling. Was she not eating at all? Was she being starved? And if so, why? I finally got my chance to ask about it when, in the middle of his meal, he started choking, and when he was finally done coughing in her face, he threw his napkin down and walked to the restrooms. I walked over to the table and asked her if she needed anything. She again just stared at me, but squinted like she was confused. Then all she said was, "Pen?" I gave her my pen, and she immediately stuck it in her hair that appeared to be pinned up, no longer to be seen, and looked back down at his plate. He started walking back to the table as I was walking away, and when I heard a loud, "Hey!" I turned around to see him standing next to her, and he motioned for me to come over. When I approached, he said, "What were you doing?" I told him I heard him coughing, which was an understatement, and wanted to make sure that he was okay and if they needed anything. He asked me if she talked to me, and I said no. Then he sat back down smiling and said good, and continued eating. After he finished eating, he paid and they left again. One of the last times I saw them was a few weeks after that experience. She was not looking good. The lace on the bottom of her dress was completely gone, and her eyes were dark and sunken in. No amount of makeup that she was wearing could cover that. Again, he went to the restroom. I saw over the wall she was looking down at the table and then looked back up. He came out and they left. I went to clean the table, and this time there was a napkin folded up in the seat next to her. It had something in a different language written on it. I immediately took it home, not telling anyone what it was, and started looking it up. It turned out it was Dutch, and it said something like, "This is not the American dream I expected. I will make my own. I will overcome." I didn't really know what to do with this information, so I kept it to myself and decided I would try asking about it if I got the chance. They came in once more, but this time the guy seemed irritated. He was short and curt with me, even when placing his order. He was very rushed throughout the whole thing, and if he needed anything else, he would use that deep voice and yell for me by name. At one point, I noticed the girl looked like she was slightly swaying, like a sickly sway, so my manager actually came over because of his yelling, warning if he didn't stop, he would be kicked out. Then he noticed the girl and leaned down, putting his hand on her shoulder, and asked if she was okay. The guy immediately got defensive, standing up and said, "She's fine. Take your hands off of her." My manager stood up and said, "How about we let her answer?" and tried to get her to talk, but she just stared at him. I wasn't over there, so this was all what he told me, but he said that she looked scared. She never said anything, but the guy grabbed her by the arm, and they both left in a rush without paying. This was enough for my manager to call the cops, since he ate most of his food anyway and skipped on the bill, so we explained to them what happened and described the weird situation with the girl. I admittedly did leave out the note I got. I didn't know if it would be relevant or if maybe she was just venting. I had no idea. I later regretted that decision. It had been a few weeks since that took place, and I was watching the news in the little break room at work. There was a man's body found in his home after police did a welfare check because he had missed work with no calls. They said he was found with a pen in his throat, so they were investigating it as a homicide. I thought it was weird, but didn't think much of it until I saw another article come up as I was scrolling through Facebook on my phone about the same guy that had been killed. This time, it had a picture of the guy, and to my surprise, it was the same one that came in with a girl. So then I went and read into the story, and sure enough, it was him, and he had been stabbed with a pen. They said that they had a person of interest, but they hadn't found her yet. All I could think was, what the hell happened between them? Why did she write what she did in Dutch? Why did she never speak? Why was she seemingly starved? And was that my pen she used? I had a quick fear that my prints could even be on it, if so, but then thought that was weeks ago. Surely it wouldn't be possible, right? I guess that was an accurate assumption because I was never contacted, but I continued to follow the story, but as far as I could tell, they never found or caught a suspect. It's still something I think about regularly, but I wouldn't even know where to start to try and find this mystery woman. So that, my friends, was another scary story collection, and this time they were all about strangers pretty much. So that's interesting. Of course, strangers of being the weird ones. And then you borrow somebody's pen and never get it back, which is bad enough. Then it was used as a weapon. Awesome. See, now I have a reason to hoard my pens. But it doesn't work anymore because I work from home, so I guess I just can't let Raven or the cats use my pens. Easy enough. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like below. And if you'd like to hear more content like this, consider subscribing. And if you're already subscribed, well then, don't hit that button. But you can also leave a comment below on your thoughts, or let me know what's something that you like to do just to kind of chill and not think about the normal stresses of everyday life. And with that being said, friends, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, take care.